doing that now. There we go. So yes, welcome everyone to our celebration of diaspora poetry. We've chosen to interpret this to mean everybody who is part of a community in a country which is maybe not where that community is from, but we're ultimately leaving that up to people's own self-identification. We've been really delighted to get people from all over the world joining us here, including some recordings from people who are based in parts of the world where it's a very unsociable hour. So we'll be hearing from them later, but I thought maybe we could start with one of our live poets, with someone who's with us right now. And I'm just going to do this in an entirely arbitrary order from depending on who's kind of next on my screen. But I also just wanted to say that we'd love to hear comments both from the audience and from our fellow poets. So please do type any comments you have into the chat box, or for the fellow poets especially, if you'd like to say something, just let me know. I'd love to hear from you if you've got anything to say about someone else's work. But yeah, the next person on my list is Jedi Sophronius. Jedi, are you happy to go first? I've got your bio
Yeah,
here.
yeah.
So I'll just introduce you quickly with the bio you sent me. Jedi is a Chinese-Indonesian writer from Jakarta. He's currently an MFA candidate at the University of Virginia, and he's also the poetry editor at Meridian, and he's lived in Indonesia, Australia, and the US. So yeah, I'll hand it over to you, Jedi. We'd love to hear from you.
Thank you. Thank you everyone for coming. So I wasn't expecting my family to be here. So shout out to my friend and my brother and my mom. um, okay, I'm gonna start with this poem that I wrote a couple of years ago, and I have some new poems as well. This one is called "In the Waves of Midnight." I have witnessed my people migrating through salt and water. They hurled their sacks of clothes from the boat to the shore, from wood to embers, and from ashes to homes. Mothers kept past lives in their pockets. I've listened to grandma's bedtime stories turning into a grocery list. There once was a pastor who ran away to become a farmer. He planted cucumbers, lettuce, milk, and Dutch biscuits. I have passed down the family fables to my younger cousins, to my many nephews and nieces. Here, our ancestors held out their baskets as they baked their dough under the sun. My vendor has grown into an adolescent, a burning flame into a silent daughter. I have kissed the earth out of loneliness. Dirt, snow, and mooncakes taste the same. I've fallen in love with a stranger on the mountain, knowing I will never see her again. I have roamed the lands to find my grave. Here, I have baptized myself, shirtless, in the waves of midnight. As the water fills my mouth, I can see the ashes rising to life. So there are a couple layers in the identity that I explored, like being a minority in Indonesia and being a minority as in other places as well. Right now, I'm in the United States, and it explores like this next poem explores like another aspect to identity and language. Um,
Sorry,
oh,
Jedi, before you leap into your second poem, I think we might have a comment on your first.
oh,
Ramon,
okay.
did I see a hand raised there? Oh, okay. Sorry, that
We
was
were
applause, not a
applauding.
hand raised. It was absolutely beautiful. Sorry, Jedi, I'll interrupt you no further.
You're fine. Okay. On navigating oceans. If your mother's accent sounds like a mountain coughing or a river crying, you might want to speak for her when ordering in a diner. You know what she wants. Save her from the other patrons turning their heads, the waiter impatiently tapping his pen. If you don't remember your father's voice, it might mean you've been away for too long. Consider a phone call. consider praying. Don't worry about disturbing the old man in his sleep. If you can't recall your old neighbor's name or from where you met that one childhood friend, it doesn't mean your memory is failing. No one belongs to two countries. If you try to live two lives, you are bound to forget. Learn to forgive that distance between you and your family. Get used to packing, even after arriving. Never staying, always crossing. And I'm sure you dream in at least two languages. You're gathering the oceans, the missed funerals, the broken accents every time you speak. Sometimes you can't understand a word anyone is saying. And I want to mention and thank Celia for choosing that poem and introducing me to this this whole program. Um, so for this next poem, it revolves around a document that um, is called the Certificate of Citizenship. That was, you know, it was used mostly to as a way to gatekeep Chinese Indonesians from entering like universities and things like that. Yeah. Certificate of Citizenship. My mother delivered me to this land. Her ancestral tears washed me clean after my first cry. I am the son of tidal waves and love, bodies crashing under clouded skies. As a child, I kissed the mango tree in my backyard, traced fingers along the moss growing on warm stone fences. Down to my shoulders, my hair flew with me wherever, rocky hills, rice fields, or muddy streets. The other boys teased me, called me a girl, called me pretty. Once the ice cream peddler arrived with his box of fruit popsicles, we piled around him, forgave one another, then looked for a spot to squat on the street where our elbows could rest against our knees. Fingers turned sweet with the melted cream. The oldest among them said, "Stop slouching, puff your chest." He was my first friend. By the time we heard the call to prayer, we were already home. I have more stories to tell, testimonies of my childhood, like how I got lost and mistook someone else's country for my own. Forgive me. They're all insignificant, aren't they? Um, and I think I'll end on this last one. Death of the Chinese in me. The Chinese boy in me was killed when the authorities forced my mother to change her name under a pear tree. Little girls with almond eyes couldn't walk the streets for anything. A pack of cigarettes, a bag of ginseng tea. When I think of my father, who doesn't speak with the tongue of a snake, I see how lucky he is. People ignore the Chinese in him. My friend asked, why do your people say I differently than mine? I sipped my tea, avoided his gaze. I know. Our mothers stand under umbrellas, waiting for their sons to return. Our sisters live in hiding, looking out their windows. Their tears can't wash away the street names. Schools, stores, our grandfathers burned or hanged on a pole. Was it not enough when we cut the braids from our heads? Under burning sky lanterns, a grandfather's hands fold, a tulip on his chest, lips chanting something Chinese.
Wow. Yes. There's so much power there, and so much beauty in the phrases you use to show some of the experiences and some of the emotions that come with living in another country and being part of a minority community. Thank you, Jedi. That was really powerful.
Thank you.
Um, unless anyone has anything they'd like to say on that, then shall I call on our next poet? Okay. Well, Next person on my screen is Jeffrey. Jeffrey, are you happy to go next? Yeah. Okay. Well, you're muted at the moment. But I'll just find the. Oh yes, there's the intro you sent me. Jeffrey was born in Jamaica and is the author of 5 books of poetry, 2 novels, 2 collections of short stories, and 3 children's books. His poems and short stories have been published in the Oxford Book of Caribbean Verse, World Literature Today, the Johannesburg Review of Books, the Oxford Book of Caribbean Short Stories, Bearden's Odyssey Poets Respond to the Art of Romare Bearden, Rattle Poets Respond, and Crab Orchard Review. He's also a recipient of the Luminary Award from the Consulate of Jamaica and a former chair for the 2019 OCM Bocas Prize for Poetry. His work is featured on the Poetry Rail at the Betsy, an homage to 12 writers that shaped Miami culture. He's currently working on a graphic novel for children, My Name is Marcus. Over to you, Jeffrey.
Thank you. And thank you also to Cecilia for inviting me to be a part of this. That was a wonderful set of poems by Jedi. I really, really enjoyed it. And yes, much love to you, Jedi. I was feeling a bit nostalgic today, so I'm only going to read poems about my children. So I'm gonna write. The first one is called Heirlooms, and it's about when Hurricane Andrew hit Miami, Florida, back in 1992. Heirlooms. Through the garbled signals of a transistor radio, my mother kept for hurricanes like this, but never like this. We scanned for the next location of ice, water, food, and catch the edge of a Caribbean tinge station, fragments of a Marley tune. No woman, no cry, everything's gonna be all right. And my son, barely 9 months, who cut a tooth while Andrew gnawed through the grove, dances with his mother by the glow of a kerosene lamp, preserved through airport terminals and garage sales. And as the window splintered, the house glittered for a moment before the walls fell flat and stood on the mantle of the fireplace we never used. In the midst of the rubble, these are only heirlooms, bind us against the darkness outside. All that she could ever give, all that we could ever pass on or possess. This light, this music. The next poem I'm going to read is Erzuli's Daughter. That was from my first collection of poems, yeah. Florida Bound. I was already missing Jamaica. Erzuli's Daughter. It began with the usual insults about her nose and hips, and the belief that her true mother lived on a coral island, protected by sunken galleys and man o' wars. These fantasies, her therapist said, were drawing her toward a different future than her parents had wished for, when they punished her for not reading the books they'd studied and sent her away on Easter egg hunts, dressed in starched pink dresses, white bonnets, and blue bows in each braid of her stubborn hair. But when she began cutting her wrists, arms, legs, and belly, her parents agreed with the psychiatrist to the prescriptions of pills, potions, and poisons to keep her grounded in this life. But then the scales became scars, became scales. Her hair grew wild and untamed, and a garden of yellows, blues, and reds sprouted on her arms, legs, and back. Her ears and lips studded with gold. And almost overnight, she changed into something she had always resembled in her own dreams, in the mirror of her mother, something beautiful and fearsome. The next one is for my daughter. It's called A Little Song. I wrote this near Valentine's Day this year. I made this for you, something simple, to stay by your side when you are lonely, sing to you when you are sad, and always to soar with you in joy. Like the time I lifted you into the sky, you held my face. We giggled like school children on our walk back from the lake in the evening dark. And a more recent one for Anna. On nights when my daughter awakens from her nightmare about the monster in our backyard, I comfort her by saying, "It's only a dream, darling." But I can hear him, Dad, growling at our back door, scratching windows in the kitchen. And I'm afraid one day he will kill you and take Mom. Sometimes, before I limp back to my room, listening to the rise and fall of her breaths, I laugh as I tuck her under the covers. But most of the time, I lie to keep her childhood memory of safety alive, so that on a morning when I'm no longer home and she wanders into the backyard searching for herself and stares into bloodshot eyes, her breath won't be as shallow, nor her hands as shaky, and pray that she will forgive me. And then the final poem, which seems apt for the diaspora. A prayer for my children. When you find yourself in a faraway land, surrounded by men, animals that mutter strange sounds, do not be afraid. Neither you, your parents, nor your ancestors have ever been alone. So trust the earth to bear you up. Follow the wind as it leads you through valleys clustered with trees heavy with fruit. Some that seem familiar enough to eat, but you still aren't sure they're the same as the ones you left on the other side of the river that you've now forgotten. Eat, feast on the bounty. Feed the fire that burns away the knot in your stomach, sets ablaze the horizon, all that your eyes can see that has been promised to you since your cry pierced the morning air. Your parents bathed you with kisses, baptized you with caresses, swaddled you in care before you uttered your first words to the moon, sun, stars, wobbled your first steps into unknowing, all the while rising with your inheritance. And if you awaken under the branches of a cotton tree, cradled in its roots, draw a circle around yourself and all those whom you love. Cross yourself 3 times before you step over the threshold. Welcome the ancestors, all the kindly spirits who have followed you, your parents, across many seas, oceans, and deserts. Entertain them with strong drink and soft food, rice, yams, bananas, the ever-present rum to bless the hands that have lifted you up and sanctified the place you now call home. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeffrey. That was really lovely. I'm already seeing how much there's a commonality in diaspora experiences, even from very different parts of the world, and maybe living in different parts of the world as well. and that's really interesting to see. I thought now we could take a break and watch a video recording by a poet who is currently living in Eastern Australia. So it's 4:20 in the morning there. So she recorded a couple of videos for us because she understandably is asleep right now. So I will just share the screen. She's given us two different poems, one of which is set to music and dance as well. So just let me know if, can you see that? Yeah, excellent. Okay. Ah, sorry, you can't hear at that, is that right? Yeah, okay, sorry. Let me. It should be. Oh, there we go. Yes. Let's try that again. I'm sorry, I've also just realized that I didn't actually introduce her either. So I will do that first and then we'll try again with the sharing. So this is Layla Lois, who is a woman of Kurdish and Celtic heritage who has lived most of her life in Aotearoa. In her poems, Layla explores a personal sense of origin that, like the ocean, binds several landscapes and times, coming back to the idea that a timeless, boundless love pervades. Her publishing history includes Southerly Journal, Jed Press, Right Now, Light Lit One, Delving into Dance, and Salient. So I'll just share the screen again. Share computer sound.
White Tulips for Orla. At spring's sweet incipience you arrive, the tender parted flower of your nougat lips, your skin sweet as milk and vanilla, waxen like the moon. Winter spurs bronze leaves around my ankles, and the cold wind stirs within me. You are like the first blooms of the season, glowing with grace. Your eyes are two mirrors, the scored whisper of a glacier. Meeting you is like rowing into a dream, as we slice through the violet waters.
So that was the first poem, and this second poem is one that she has done to dance and music.
Rose Adage. Effort and grace are a shining apologue, not friends nor lovers but confidants, and undercover they share beautiful little secrets with each other. Perhaps there is no more glittering a mirage than in ballet Aurora's rose adage, manifest in fallacy only to those who have danced those steps and so truly know the pain and the beauty of her incessant releve rising with each petal of the rose. One summer I spent so many hours rising to clutch each petal. Anti-gravity, the high tilt of my head, my spine, my waist, each bone, muscle and cavity in stretch velvet, taut as a horse in reins. So unfalteringly as a spring flower opening, the bloom swells and unfurls, the stem arches and glistens, in this story laid like a carnation of ballet, beauty, and forced sleep. I watch her adage after these years, and I am piqued by the memory of that dance. At least there can be no fiction in knowing that love cannot be without fear, and grace without the struggle of growing. Rose Adage. Effort and grace are a shining apologue, not friends nor lovers but confidants, and undercover they share beautiful little secrets with each other. Perhaps there is no more glittering a mirage than in ballet Aurora's rose adage, manifest in fallacy only to those who have danced those steps and so truly know the pain and the beauty of her incessant releve rising with each petal of the rose. One summer I spent so many hours rising to clutch each petal. Anti-gravity, the high tilt of my head, my spine, my waist, each bone, muscle, and cavity, in stretch velvet, taut as a horse in reins. So unfalteringly as a spring flower opening, the bloom swells and unfurls, the stem arches and glistens, in this story layered like a carnation of ballet, beauty, and forced sleep. I watch your adage after these years, and I am piqued by the memory of that dance. At least there can be no fiction in knowing that love cannot be without fear, and grace without the struggle of growing.
So that was Layla Lois. She's just released a book of poetry, which you can find if you Google her name. She had a launch recently. Next, I'd like to call on my colleague, Maddie, to read some poetry from someone else who can't be here today. She is a poet who appeared in one of our panels just a couple of weeks ago. And her name is Kuo Zhang. She's a PhD candidate and graduate teaching assistant at the University of Georgia. She has a book of poetry in both Chinese and English, Broadleaves, and her poem One Child Policy was awarded second place in the 2012 Society for Humanistic Anthropology Poetry Competition. She also served as poetry and arts editor for the Journal of Language and Literacy Education in 2016 and 2017. So without further ado, Maddie, could you bring to us Kuo Zhang's poetry?
I would love to. I just have to make a note first that I love the diversity of this, you guys. This is so cool. This is so exciting. And also, if you didn't catch the webinar that Kuo spoke on, she had some amazing things to say. And that just really helped emphasize the importance of poetry and how this art form means so much to so many of us. So I have two poems from her, and this first one is called Promise. A promise to a child isn't hard to keep. Even if what he yearns for is something funny, you can't bear to see him weep. You can promise every day, cheap, stickers, an ice cream cone, more swing time. A promise to a child isn't hard to keep. Then promise bigger, promise deep, love and company and grandma's gold ring for a future beloved. All yours, boy, don't weep. Promise Captain Marvel a Wrangler Jeep. He doesn't like Sung Wukong, your monkey king. Fine, a promise to a child isn't hard to keep. Go ahead, promise Ivy Leagues, mountains steep. Oh, I'm gonna butcher this word, I'm sorry. Esquamlunga, cosmic travel. Just kidding, he knows, he knows. He ceases to weep. Finally, promise a room, always a place to sleep. No need to book, and some dumpling soup. A parent's promise isn't hard to keep, though maybe it may be hard for you not to weep. So that was her first one, and then we have another one here that's a bit more relevant to the times, and it's called Quarantine. I'm sure he has forgotten how he'd quarantined peacefully in my womb for 9 months. Now we're quarantined with chicken flying, dog jumping, and a womb-like home, waiting for rebirth. I try to teach him to play Fan Hua Sheng, a string game, just like he toyed the umbilical cord. Soon he asked again for swings and slides, the blue mushrooms that spray water, flamingos, guo bao ru, crispy, sweet, and pork rice and pork slices. What's wrong with all of them? Virus, invisible, but everywhere. I swallowed the second half, and hatred, especially for you, an Asian face.
Thank you. Yes, as you say, that second one in particular is very pertinent for this year, or a bit more than a year now. So yeah, thank you very much to Kuo Zhang for that contribution, and thank you to Maddie for reading them. The next person on my screen is Celia. Celia, are you happy to go next? Yeah.
Yes,
Okay.
I'd love to.
So I'll just quickly introduce you then. Celia Alvarez hails from Miami, Florida, and is the editor of Prospectus, a literary offering. She has 3 collections of poetry: Shapeshifting, winner of the 2005 Spire Press Poetry Award, The Stones, and Multiverses. She's been nominated for both the Pushcart and Best of the Net awards. She has work forthcoming in the anthologies How to Write a Form Poem and Moving Images, Poetry Inspired by Cinema, and the journals Pensive, a global journal of spirituality, and the Arts and Blue Mountain Review. Celia was born in Spain while her parents, Cuban immigrants, awaited their visas for entry into the United States after fleeing Castro's communist regime. Over to you, Celia.
Thank you. Thank you so much for inviting me to be here today. It's very nice to see even some familiar names. I'm only going to read to you 4 poems. The first one is from my new book, Multiverses, but it was originally published in Iodine Poetry Journal, which is sadly now defunct. But it's called My Father Leaves Cuba. I imagine it was him and not my mother who felt love and obedience, equal tensions in her solar plexus like a chord. Nor do I know who came first or who came after. He's never talked to me about the night he sat on the front stoop of that small house in Old Havana they once shared, looking out into the night, finding nothing more that belonged to them. Tendrils of hope already fastening like seed pods to the heavy coats and quilts packed for flight to Spain. I can see him, no shoes, elbows on knees, always as supple as sugar cane, sharp as a machete. The next poem that I'm going to read to you, I'm going backwards, is from my second collection. And it's titled Hialeah, which I almost said is a suburb of Miami, but the Hialeah people would get so mad if they heard that. They are the city of Hialeah. And it is a city that has a very large concentration of Cuban immigrants from the 60s and 70s. Look at Jeffrey laughing, he knows about Hialeah. Hialeah. There is only one road in, Lejeune, with its multiple lanes draining the airport of its sludge. All that matters is leaving. Then the tract houses in discount shades of deco, flamingo pink, phlegmatic mint, sunburned salmon. All the boys wear their crotches low, big shoes and puffed heads, short legs, empty threats. All day long, the women sweep the porches out into the street. Sweep, sweep, all day long. All day long, the traffic groans like a birthing woman. All day long and all night, too. This is the city that never sleeps, that works all day. The old men, too tired to stand or sit, wait on their haunches for the liquor store to open. In a few hours, they turn into beer bottles, girdled in brown paper bags, scratched off lotto tickets, spit thick as bird shit. They go back to the dog track, to Mango Hill, to their daughters' houses. The women sigh like bus brakes. There are no girls in Hialeah. The factories stack up like cardboard boxes. All day long, they make uniforms and artificial hips. Every corner has a clinic, a convenience store, a gas station, a fast food pit. I never lived in Hialeah. Nobody did. And then these last 2 poems are from my first collection, Shape Shifting. And the first one is a parody of Sylvia Plath's Daddy, which if you have not read, you should immediately go and do so because it is a very good poem. This is from when Castro was still alive. Papi. You do not do anymore, black boot, under which you have kept my people for 46 years, poor and brown with nothing to eat or make do. Papi, we've all dreamed of killing you, and yet you still live, held together by camouflage, a mass-produced plastic soldier, small as the pay of pigs, and big as all of Russia, when it floated slow and deadly as an iceberg, cooling the waters off Key West. We all prayed to get rid of you. Ay, Dios. In the lengua franca, in the Plaza de la Revolucion, left empty by the roll of your R's, no one can understand you. My American friend says you are a hero. In the movies, you are quaint and comical, an old furry badger pumping your fist in the air. I drown off Biscayne Bay. Blub, 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 blub. I can hardly care. All Cubans are the same. And the music, hot, hot, hot. Waves, waves, sweeping me away to the USA, to Miami, Tampa, Union City. I begin to talk like Ricky. I think I may well be Ricky. The sands of Varadero, the sweetness of sugarcane are not very pure or true. With my African roots and my Catholic saints and my bongo drums and my dominoes, I may be a bit of a Ricky. I have always been unimpressed by you, with your missile base, your porqueria, and your dirty beard and your pirate eye, bland black, comandante, compañero, oh you, no dictator but a machista, so pure you made us all women. Every mommy adores her son, a rosary around the neck, and a rifle over the shoulder. You stand at the podium, papi, in a live feed on the tube, condemning el embargo instead of el exilio, but no less a Cuban for that. No, not any less anyone's papi who drinks cafe and breathes politics across the street from Caballero Funeral Home. At 15, I tried to swim and get back to you. I thought even Guantanamo would do, but they pulled me out of the water and one of my feet touched dry land. And then I knew what to do. I made a little muñequito of you, a tiny wax man in a green suit, old and fat and somewhat cute. I prayed and pricked and poked him through. I cut up my calling card. I can't afford any more cousins. If I've killed one man, I've killed thousands, all of them right and still arguing on cable access, on Radio Mambí, on El Diario de las Américas. Papi, you can give up now. Your people are tired and they only pretended to like you. They are all really plotting against you. They always hated you. Papi, papi, cabrón, we're through. This last poem, thank you. This last poem is called Revelation. You asked me to make a poem of myself, of the fruits and vegetables, the grains, the music that keep my body alive, to display these to you in exotic rhymes and meters, in italics, to sing sweet as a fat lady with a beard and a scream in her heart. I fucking hate you with your simple mind, your soft arms, your big guns that you display unloaded, all the time eating the bullets at night, one by one, like candy you didn't pay for. You know what? The best mangoes come from Florida, and my tits are shocking, small and white. I will stop waiting for the poetry that won't ever come, for the feisty grandmothers who loved men and baked weapons out of wheat, for the colorful aunts who were raped as virgins and bled jewels, rubies and garnets now buried by the sea like evil children, for cousins who went bad, became movie stars or revolutionaries or saints, for men who teach about the flesh with liquor or guitars. My front porch is bare of wicker furniture and looks out only on the street. No children play here, not even dogs, and the cats die quickly, leaving behind kittens exactly like themselves. I have stopped naming them. I know nothing of plant life. I know one flower, the impatiens, but not how to grow it. In the summer, the hurricanes come and take away the trees, eating up the shade, forcing me indoors. But you must give up your stupid girlish romance. You must not ask me to make music for you out of sirens, chainsaws, and ice cream trucks, the lullabies of air conditioners and generators, or even of the rain. You will not learn anything from me. You must make sense of your own demons, the witches and the Africans you burned, the fields of corn you left untended to grow money. I won't be your new Indian. I won't cry a single tear for you or talk about my people without sarcasm. In fact, I have no people. Make sure you understand. I have nothing to declare, nothing to confess. Thank you.
Thank you, Celia. Some really powerful poetry there. And it again just really reminds me of how similar some of the ideas are that are coming across here, and how similar some of the experiences are as well, I think. And that also informs our next poet, who can't be here today because, oh, well, to be perfectly frank, because I didn't ask her, but because I wasn't able to get hold of her. Her name is Maria Vagatova. She is a Khanty poet. And I thought it was really important to include an Indigenous poet because I feel like there are some real commonalities and also, of course, some differences between the diaspora experience and the Indigenous experience. So I wanted to share with you today some poems from Maria Vagatova, Khanty poet. The Khanty are a people who live in Siberia in Russia. And personally, I find some of Maria Vagatova's poems really moving. The first one is called My Word, My Tongue. If I couldn't hear my own words, if I didn't know my own language, who would listen? How on earth would I live? Every branch of the tree of language is sacred to my people. The smallest root of my words binds the threads of their hearts. If I couldn't hear my own words, if I didn't know my own language, who would listen? How on earth would I live? So that's the first one. The second is called Dirge for the Land of the Khanty. My forests, adorned with necklaces of many-coloured beads, my groves of waving rushes in rust-coloured bogs, all lie trodden and trampled, swallowed and devoured by the greedy mouth of quicksand. My embroidered rainbow ribbons of many-coloured cloth lie trampled in black bogs. Multicoloured, many-layered shades of rainbow hues have been stomped into silt. I hear the wail of Mother Earth. They have pulled the hairs from my head one by one. They have yanked out many strands one by one. The ornaments of my headdress fall apart. My rainbow necklaces have been plucked out by the roots. My very breath has gone up in smoke. O generous Father Light, I am about to expire. O great Mother Earth, how should I live now? An air of dread infuses my spirit. My body is covered with cold slime. My breath has receded deep into my heart. My tears of grief, my calamitous tears, have been absorbed by the earth like the rain itself. But the tears of my sacred mother, where shall they go? And the final poem is called The People of Tukyakang Village. I make my way to Tukyakang Village, gazing deep into the land from the seat of my sledge. Rows of trees covering high hilltops like a patterned ribbon draw nearer. I gaze deep into the land where green trees thrive. I grasp them with my eyes and wonder. Happiness fills my soul. My heart embraces lake after lake, strewn like a necklace, and wonders. Rivers and streams run in patterns. Their circles and arches are highways where fish live and travel. I see them moving along with me. These are the homes of fish heavy with caviar. I find boat trails and sledge paths of people who have passed this way, holding them in my heart as I follow their lead. In Tukyakang village, I place my feet on the land of people I have never met before, Kanti I have never seen, people who greet me with news of life, news of beasts and birds and people, near and far. They adorn my heart with ornaments of beasts and birds alike, patterned after the creatures of forests and lakes. The Kanti of Tukyakang village have captured my heart. The people of Tukyakang village have captured my soul. So that is Maria Vagatova, and I would thoroughly recommend this book in which I found her work, by the way. It's called The Way of Kinship. It's an anthology of native Siberian literature. So it can be difficult to find such work in translation without speaking Kanti, for example. So this is one such way to do so. Next on our screen is Ramon Jimenez. Ramon, are you happy to go next? Excellent. So Ramon is an educator and writer who resides in Washington State. He's originally from Los Angeles, where his parents migrated to from Mexico in the 70s. He teaches language arts at an alternative high school. Along with teaching, he also leads a young writers program called The Boot, where youth publish a literary journal centered around poetry and spoken word. He enjoys writing poetry and short stories that focus on immigrant communities, geopolitics, travel, and location. In his poetry, there is space for everyone, from the taqueros of Mexico City to the malicious Border Patrol agents. His poems are featured in Rigorous Magazine, the Anti-Languorous Project, and Allegria Publishing. Over to you.
Thank you all for having me. Thank you, Daniel, and thank you, Celia, for recommending me for this event. I'm going to read 5 poems, and each poem is going to take you kind of through a journey from Latin America and Mexico to here in Seattle, where I somehow ended up so far away from where I was conceived. My first poem is like a personification poem, and I call it Divided into Different Parts. Divided into different parts, cursed with having what they crave and forced to give it up for free. The bananas and the coffee picked from my back with an open gash, like the gas burning in those cars. All of it extracted from my veins. Necklaces of stolen gold that dangle around necks, dug up and taken from the vastness of my flesh. During happy hour, the cups of rum they sip, made from the sugarcane fields that were violently sewed to my sides, just like that white powdery dust that they snort, grown and processed on the foothills of my chest, move through borders and blood. I want to cut them off like the machetero does the cane, take away the hemp lattes, avocado toast, weekend benders and bad choices, light it on fire, watch it all disperse into ash under cloudy eyes. But they take, consume, and abuse. And if I said no, I know what they would do. Topple a government or two, put some strong man turned madman in charge, expose my veins and rip open my wounds, my suffering on display for them every time they turn on their television in their suite that sits on the coast. And so this next poem I wrote kind of in reflection to when I had to go to Mexico, like in 4th grade. I went to Mexico with my family, to Jalisco, where my family's from. That's on the western side of Mexico. The most beautiful part of Mexico, I'm going to say. I'm biased. And I got like a reverse kind of culture shock thing. I was like, whoa, there's cows here. You know, I'm a city person. I'm used to traffic jams and pit bulls. So seeing cows and lizards and all this other stuff was like really eye-opening to me. This poem is also been published in True Chili, which is a cowboy kind of a publisher, but it's called Never Allowed to Take Life. Deep in the mountains of Jalisco, Christmas was celebrated with the flesh of bulls, slipped by the edge of the matador before becoming breakfast the next day. On my uncle's busted down, barely functional pickup truck, we moved through towns, crossing cattle ranches and resting fields of corn that prayed for rain. Without insurance or seatbelts, we rode on the truck's bed, moving through bumpy roads, riddled with potholes, praying for our souls to stay in place. The corn and the tortillas came from my uncle's field, ground and mixed into masa by my aunt's wrinkly hands, like the smack in the face salsa, formed from the garden, crushed in the molcajete. At a cousin's baptism party, we ate meat, or what we thought was meat, only to find out from my brother that it was blood from the morning slaughter of pigs, stirred up with onions and salt. For we were never allowed to celebrate life without taking one in exchange. So now we're going to keep going on this journey, and I'm going to take you to the border. I went to school in San Diego State University, so I lived in San Diego for about 3 years, 30 minutes away from the Tijuana, San Diego kind of border area. We had border patrol agents, some of them at our school in the graduate program I was in. A lot of them were Latinos. So this poem speaks to that internalized oppression of having some people who are of Latin American descent doing the job of border enforcement. I titled this poem Lead and Testicles. The Border Patrol man holds so much power, in charge of protecting us, yet poorly trained and educated, ill-equipped for a world full of change, while given a loaded gun that readies to kill. And so, does this make him a hero? The main star in some action movie from the 80s where he gets to play some tough guy that guards that scribbled line with lead and testicles? And why is he so big and so tough? So tough that he dumps tear gas on kids, shoots people for throwing rocks, bashes the heads of dehydrated souls while he separates children by force, sending them off to makeshift concentration camps. And if you ask him, he's here to protect the country. Yet why was he caught on the cartel payroll, habitually blindfolded to shipments of black tar and bricks of coke? And what is his last name again? Is it one of those Spanish last names? Lopez, Rodriguez, Hernandez, Jimenez? It must be easy for him to detain friends, cousins, brothers. Can he hang out in the barrio? Or do they call him Pocho, Malinche, Sicario? Thank you. Okay. Now we're going to keep going more north, and I'm going to take you to LA. I'm going to take you to my favorite taco stand, because in LA they actually have street vendors since the Mexican community there is so entrenched. My mom, for instance, never learned English because she didn't have to. And so tacos for us Mexicans, it's like religion. It's like maybe fish and chips for you guys in the UK or something like that. It's what we eat every day. So my favorite taco stand was on the corner of Avalon and 108th, and this is an homage to that vendor. In the parking lot of La Superior supermarket, you can find a taco stand with the most confident taquero in all LA. Proudly from Michoacan, he only sells one kind, the barbacoa. Every part of the cow is made available: tongue, cheeks, head, some regular cuts of chuck and brisket for the less adventurous. All simmered together until tender, the heat preserved with a giant plastic bag and secured with wooden cloth pins. Nothing gets out. He dedicates himself to this one meal only, and he's so confident in his product. If you order 2, he gives you 4. If you order 4, he gives you 8. I tried to order 2, but ended up paying for 10. And tacos can be very addicting. It's just the way they are, especially when they're like, sometimes they'll sell them like this small. You don't have to eat like 20 of them. All right, so now I'll take you to where I'm at. I live here in Seattle, Washington. I'm in constant culture shock. The weather is like gray and rainy all the time. The people here are mostly white. I sometimes feel like an outsider. I never felt like a minority growing up in LA because I had my whole community there. So to leave California, go somewhere else, I feel it every day, like, oh, I am different, and it bothers me. So this poem speaks to that. To be born here, To be born in a place surrounded by walls, reinforced with hate and barbed wire, when walls can be climbed, can be dug under, lined up with dynamite and ignited to nothingness. To be born here, but to never be from here. To have a flag waved at you that only reminds you of theft and loot. Never freedom, no rights for all, because after all, they failed to fully erase the images of the enslaved with scars on their back from each textbook. To be born here, but to never be from here, yet to be told to get the fuck out and go back to Mexico by people with pasty pale faces and blonde hair who come from people that were also never born here. To be a foreigner and a citizen all in one, to live in a city like Seattle where the whitest of the whitest have the nerve to ask me if I'm a native Seattleite. To be a gringo, I think, is to worship the illusion that this land is theirs, or when land, dirt, grass, sand belong to Pachamama, not those slave owners in powdered faces and wigs who signed a piece of paper. To be born in a place with so much illusionary patriotic energy, only to have it deflated by someone like me, someone who's from here, yet not really from here. Thank you.
Wonderful.
Thank you. Yes, it absolutely was wonderful. And I think that last line especially could almost speak for every member of a diaspora in some ways, or at least for that kind of experience. Before we move on to our final live poets, I just wanted to share the links to register for our next 2 poetry showcases. We have 2 more this month. So if anyone's interested in hearing some more poetry, we have poetry by NGO workers and volunteers next Friday at the same time. And the following Friday, we have what we're calling timeless poems, which are historical poems on these themes. So on themes of migration and identity and community. And I've been scouring the historical records for interesting poems from all over the place, from several thousand years ago up until not far from the present day. So if you're interested in either of those, then please do sign up. We'd love to see you there. Maddie, if you wouldn't...
if you want to read, you can sign up to be a reader for Timeless Poems as well, since obviously many of those authors will not be able to join us live.
Absolutely, yes. That's a very good point. Yes, we would love to have some readers to join us to read some historical poems with us. And yes, Maddie, if you wouldn't mind just sharing those links on the Facebook live video as well, just so that our friends who are watching via Facebook Live can see them as well. Yeah, so I'd like to move on to our last live poet, which is Anuj Bandari. Anuj is a performance artist and writer and community organizer, living and making at the intersections of restorative justice, queerness, and narratives of migration and movement. Anuj is the network coordinator at Restorative Justice Initiative, as well as a project lead at How to Build Up, an international non-violent peace-building organization exploring non-violence through art and technology. Anuj is also an ensemble member of the New York Neo-Futurists and Fresh Lime Soda theatre companies. Those are both absolutely fantastic names for theatre companies. I do hope we're going to hear more about those. But over to you, Anuj.
Nice, thank you. And thank you all so much for the poetry that you're gifting us. I have a few pieces that I'm going to read, and it's been a joy listening over the past hour because there's just so many like themes and even words that emerge that like there's like a web that grows through all of the different poems that is very nonlinear and very beautiful. But I really love food. And I love collecting different forms of recipes. And I wrote this piece called Aloo Paratha. And aloo paratha is an Indian food, which you will hear about in a moment. And so this first piece is a collection of different pieces of things I've learned about this food. So, aloo paratha. Recipe number 1, my nani. He can nod his head in agreement through conversations on masculinity as much as he wants, but there is still an invisible line, electric fence between the tiles of the kitchen and the dining room. I wonder if he, my uncle, mama, imagines me getting shocked every time I walk through, or if he longs, if he craves to know what it's like to feel oneself be relinquished to the burn of stovetops, places where I have watched women in my family carve prayer space out of corners, melting into the smells of fennel and mustard seed. She, grandmother, Nani, looks at me. Hi, Munna, she says, and I remind her that I want to learn more recipes, that I wanted her to teach me the things that she has never been asked to pass down before. I point to the aloo paratha that she has started to prepare. You can't learn that one, she says. It's too difficult. And with every inhale as I watch her cook, I feel sparks of the electric fence begin to whisper secrets behind me. Recipe 2, street stall. Okay, so from what I understand, they knead the dough into one large ball, not with any precise measurements, but rather until the consistency is where they want it. And then they divide it into many smaller balls to make the individual parathas. This place not only had aloo, but paneer and gobi as well, each already cooked, spiced, finely chopped, mashed, garnished. Each of the dough balls were roughly the size of a baseball. And a big dent is pushed in on top with the thumbs of these women at the stall. They take a palm of filling and push it in before rounding the sides of the dough back to the top and then flattening it on the sizzling pan with oil and letting the whole thing get golden brown and crispy. There is another young woman with a notebook. She's taking people's orders, and this notebook has pages, I mean pages filled. And the quickness by which they make these parathas is like an intricate machine of fine art. I don't understand how all the filling does not fall out. And I wonder, is this what Nani meant when she called this too difficult? Recipe number 3, chitra. The earliest picture of Chitra Didi and I is from when I was 3 years old. She is holding me up as I cling to a tree in the front of Nani's apartment in Calcutta. When Chitra Didi has me over for dinner 25 years later, there is a kind of elation that exudes from her. She is making me aloo paratha and raita. And before I have finished one, another appears on my plate. Food tastes different when it's made with this much love. Her son, now 6, sits next to me and watches me as I eat. My mom calls me the next day to say that she talked to Chitra Didi. Chitra Didi told her that making food for me is like making food for a god, and I know that that was meant to be endearing, but many parts of me, including those that imagine the pride through which he, uncle, mama would respond to a comment like that, starts to run laps from the dining room to the kitchen and back again, melting into the shocks from the electric fence until I am brought back down to the ground. I don't want to be a god, I tell my mom. I want to be a tree. Recipe number 4, the internet. I have learned to protect myself from certain secrets. There is a joy in not knowing. Recipe number 5, my mother. When we eat aloo paratha at my parents' house in the suburbs of Cleveland, they come out of a frozen, sealed bag bought from the place that we just referred to as the Indian store. I have never asked my mom if she knows how to make aloo paratha from scratch, nor do I know if I am all too interested in the answer. When my mom tells me to just be happy, I don't question it or call it out or tell her it's not easy. When she says it, it feels like truth, feels like she is passing on to me what she had to do. And between the dreams of Calcutta and a life spent raising kids and working and feeding the dog and building a kitchen as sacred space in the suburbs, the rip of a plastic opening to a pack of frozen aloo parathas feels like a tear in space and time. And I wonder if it really matters how something is made if there is a love of feeding somebody cooked into its process. And right before the frozen food hits the sizzling pan, I wonder if my mom wishes if she could crawl into that plastic opening back into her mother's arms. When I walk from the table to the stove in my mother's house, I am not a god. I am not a tree. I am just a child. When I walk from the table to the stove in my mother's home, I feel no electric shocks. I hear no whispers. That's Aloo Paratha. The next one that I'll read. So one of the things, so I'm Indian, and I spend a decent amount of time in India. I'm very thankful to have a lot of family there and the ability to still be able to go back and forth. And one of the things that I do a lot when I go is just go on these long walks and kind of imagine if I grew up there, who might my friends have been? And I saw these three young men, these boys, just like all piled up on top of this motorbike, and watched them and thought it was just the most beautiful thing I've seen. And so I wrote this poem called "For When I Ask You If You Know How to Drive a Motorcycle." For when I ask you if you know how to drive a motorcycle. When you see the soft Desi boys draped across the panting bike, you will notice how the one with hands like yours clasps the driver's chest, holding on to a trembling cliff. You will notice how the one with feet like yours curves those wild fins before the concrete still above sea. You will notice how the one with greasy black hair does not ask for a window to lean on as it draws its calligraphy. When you see the soft Desi boys draped across the horizon, you will mourn how your fingers look for a beating chest when you build a time bomb for youth that you call a capsule. You will imagine what it feels like for your hands to grip something so near for life and still to manage to let it feel like love. You will sand your own feet, leaving dust across the laughing floor for something to point to when you demand proof of your own friction. When you see the soft Desi boys draped across the tightening belt, you will respond to the parts of yourself incubated behind drowning lungs, the one that is asking to ride quietly through the air untucked, wearing tattered cottons so the wind can grace the body's parts that the hands of others cannot reach. You will long for a mirror, to call their exquisite knot on this motorbike your childhood, to burn down the kickstand, to ride away from the hungry thieves and out into the folding country. And I'll read one more really quickly, and it's called Baby Between. And there's multiple gods within Hindu culture, and there's this ongoing conversation of like, is Hinduism monotheistic or polytheistic? If it's acknowledged that all of these gods are representations rather than literal multiple gods, but there is this one god who takes the form of often like a baby bull named Nandi, and Nandi is like a secret keeper and like a traveling vessel. And so I imagine I have this like picture in my head of Nandi walking like between places and transcending borders. And so this is called Baby Between. Walk the spotted baby. It is balancing on simple tightrope string with ends fastened by soft mittais, a joyous taste. It has a shaky foot somewhere between the Ganges and the Great Lakes. Adorn the calf with bells and a sky called pasture. Let its flossing toes feel no burn as colors massage onto its bristles and a crown upon its brow. Ask the baby about secrets, how they can be spoken without sweetest words, jaggery, sauteing rose, fennel seed, milk gold from bleeding saffron. Ask about generations, how they grip calloused palms to a cord, dripping vowels into mouths that cannot be used to round edges of melting sweets. Ask about its raised ear, and how many dreams it has learned to hold while watching blind hands attempt once more to guide its placeless body home. And those are the poems I'm sharing today, so thank you all.
Lovely, thank you so much, Anuj. I have to say, this probably won't mean anything to anyone who's on speaker view, but I've had this on gallery view the whole time. And your first poem, Anuj, Aluparata, the most wonderful visual compliment to it was the sight of Ramon falling off his chair with laughter at every other line. It was just absolutely fantastic. Yeah, so thank you very much. And our final poem is from another absent friend, which I will pass over to Maddie to introduce.
Thank you. And before I read this poem too, I just want to thank all of you for participating. This has just been so cool that just some background on me and one of the reasons why Insight Collaborative started. We initially started as a story sharing platform because I am the descendant of Japanese American diaspora, but also Japanese Americans who were interned during World War II. And my great grandfather was actually arrested at Poetry Group at Maneki Restaurant in Seattle. So we have a very nice full circle event happening here. And so poetry, you know, not just as a way to preserve heritage and to pass on stories and experiences through family lineage, but also as a way of expression and as a way of activism has always meant a lot to me. And so it's so cool hearing all of these different common threads between these diaspora experiences. Also the emphasis on the importance of food. Love me some good food poetry. You guys made me hungry too. I had to jump up and grab a snack because I was just craving. I live here in Istanbul currently, and we have some really good Afghan food. We have really good Syrian food, but I've been missing tacos, like hardcore missing street tacos. So thank you, Ramon, for your piece. Brought back some good nostalgia. And so there's been some great poems here about the diaspora experience. And initially last week, we were going to share poems by refugees, and we had not a super high turnout of poets who were able to join us live or contribute. And so we've sort of shifted some of those poems over to next week that apply to the humanitarian poetry theme. But this one I wanted to share this week, and it's from my friend Amer Al-Haj, and he's written some other pieces. But this one, it was published in a book that we published in 2017 called Leaving Syria. We included a couple of different works from people that we had met living in camps. And I think this experience, you know, aside from my own personal family experience, living in camps and seeing the way that people were processing their experiences and sharing their stories through lots of different mediums. Through one of our board members, Abdulaziz, did photography. He's also done some poetry, through storytelling, through music, dancing. It made me realize how important of a role the arts play in helping people preserve these journeys and helping them cope along the way. So this poem is by Amer, and it is one that he wrote about the journey itself at a very strategic interpoint, one that if we were to be watching on the news, the beach crossings, the ocean crossing at the time in 2016, 2017, this was still very much in the news when you read about the refugee crisis, the boat crossing between Turkey and Greece. And I think all of us who are looking at this from the outside in had one perception of what was happening, and we'd failed to sort of grasp the bigger journey and to understand it. And it was through his poem that he wrote that I really got a deeper understanding of that. So we're going to end with this poem here. And his poem is called Please Don't Cry. 1 second at the camp's clinic, a familiar medication handed to the man whose request I translate. 2 minutes on the shores of Izmir, some day in February on a cold night, 1 o'clock after midnight. A woman in her 20s, a small child in her arms, 1 year maybe, wakes from his sleep. He begins to weep. The cry breaks the dark, shakes the invisible snake moving towards the rubber boat on the beach. Quiet, we must be quiet. Silence in our steps. Louder the baby screams. It grows. The head of the line stops. We obey. We stand silent, motionless. The smuggler's pocket produces a small box. He walks up to the woman and the little boy. Give him 10 drops to sleep. This stuns everyone, yet no one speaks a word. No one opposes. Even if they wanted to, they wouldn't. We're in pitch darkness. They have their feelings, although you won't see crying, laughter, or anger. I'm near the woman. She opens the canister. Will he wake up again if I give him 10? 1 second it would take me to reassure her. Answer yes, but the word chokes up in my throat because I do not really understand what's going on. The smuggler's voice speaks before I can. Of course he will. We give some children more than that. Let's hurry. The woman sits on the ground, tries to force the child who resists the medicine. He does not want to be part of this crime. Her hands shake, her breath is troubled. I'm called to help them finish. I approach them and grab the boy with the mother. Together we pour the blobs into his mouth. The cries have not increased, but the screaming has. I see the woman's face today, her eyes filled with tears when forced to drug her son. I still remember her fear for her child, fear of the sea, and I wonder, why does the enemy enter our land, loud with planes, guns, and explosions? But we, the land's owners, we have to leave in silent caution. Even our children must not weep. And that concludes our Diaspora poetry. Yes, huge round of applause for Amer. And if he's able to see this later, I want to thank him for letting me share that poem repeatedly. I use it as a teaching tool. I use it, as in our book and for events like this, incredibly powerful and just a true testament to how much that medium can contribute to our understanding of all of these issues. And thank you, Daniel. Do you have any closing remarks?
I just want to say a huge thank you to everyone who's contributed today. I've always felt at my best when I am with groups of people from all over the world, when I'm living with groups of people from all over the world, socializing, working with groups of people from all over the world. And this Zoom chat has just really reinforced that for me, that even if we're all stuck at home and not able to see people, there's still real beauty to be found just in bringing people from all over the world together to enjoy some poetry. So thank you all so much for joining us.
Yeah, I echo that completely. Thank you all so much. It would be wonderful to see you all again, either at further events this month or next year when we do this all over again. We'll see what else, what new writings or new reflections everyone has. But thank you all for your time today.